Hi. We're in Walter Rauschenbusch, Christianity and the Social Crisis, Part 6. Rauschenbusch entitles this section, The Champions of the Poor, still talking, of course, about the role of the Hebrew prophets. He says, we advance another step in our study when we emphasize that the sympathy of the prophets, even of the most aristocratic among them, was entirely on the side of the poorer classes. Professor Couch says, quote, since Amos it was the alpha and omega of prophetic preaching to insist on right and justice, to warn against the oppression of the poor and helpless. The edge of their invectives was turned against the land hunger of the landed aristocracy who joined house to house and laid field to field, as Amos says, till this is Amos and Isaiah talking here, till a country of sturdy peasants was turned into a series of great estates, against the capitalistic ruthlessness that sold the righteous for silver and the needy for a pair of shoes, thrusting the poor free man into slavery to collect a trifling debt, against the venality of the judges who took bribes and had a double standard of law for the rich and the poor. This dominant trait of their moral feeling reacted on their theology, so that it became one of the fundamental attributes of their God that he was the husband of the widow, the father of the orphan, and the protector of the stranger. The widows and the fatherless were those who had no concrete power to back their claims, no influence, no financial interest, no pull with the police, judges, and aldermen of that time. The stranger was the immigrant who had no part in the blood kinship of the clan, and hence no share in the land and no voice in the common affairs of the village. His modern brother is the proletarian immigrant of our cities, who also has no share in the modern means of production and no political power to protect his interests. When the prophets conceived Jehovah as the special vindicator of these voiceless classes, it was another way of saying that it is the chief duty in religious morality to stand for the rights of the helpless. A man's sympathy is a more decisive fact in his activity than his judgment. One man today may disapprove of a given action of a railway or a coal combine, but his instinctive sympathy is always with property and the vested interests. Another man may lament and condemn a foolish strike or headlong violence, but he will dwell on the extenuating circumstances and hold to the fundamental justice of the cause of labor. This division of sympathy is now coming to be the real line of cleavage in our public affairs. There's no question on which side the sympathy of the prophets was enlisted. Their protest against injustice and oppression, to the neglect of all other social evils, is almost monotonous. To the more judicial and scientific temper of our day, their invective would seem overdrawn, and their sympathy would seem partisanship. In Jeremiah and in the prophetic Psalms, the poor, as a class, are made identical with the meek and godly, and rich and wicked are almost synonymous terms. How did the championship of the oppressed come to be so essential a part of prophetic morality? It would be hard to find a parallel to it anywhere. What other nation has a library of classics in which the spokesmen of the common people have the dominant voice? If anyone cares to assert that divine inspiration alone will account for the fact, I should have no quarrel with the assertion. If the people ever come to their own in days to come, it may be that this trait of the Old Testament will come to be a stronger proof of its inspiration than the arguments that have hitherto done duty in theology. But there were good historical causes for the attitude of the prophets in contemporary social movements. When the nomad tribes of Israel settled in Canaan and gradually became an agricultural people, they set out on their development towards civilization with ancient customs and rooted ideas that long protected primitive democracy and equality. Some tribes and clans claimed an aristocratic superiority of descent over others. Within the tribe there were elders and men of power to whom deference was due, as a matter of course. But there was no hereditary social boundary line no graded aristocracy or caste, no distinction between blue blood and red. The idea of a mesalliance, which plays so great a part in the social life of European nations and in the plots of their romantic literature, is wholly wanting in the Old Testament. When the Bible became the property of the common man in the age of the Reformation, the total absence of a feudal nobility in the divinely instituted social life of Israel struck the people as an astonishing fact. It contributed greatly to emancipate them from their feudal reverence and added force to the democratic movements of that revolutionary age. The impression of primitive democracy made by the Bible is expressed in the old saying on which John Ball preached to the English peasants in Wat Tyler's Rebellion. And that saying was, "When Adam douf and Eve span, where was then a gentleman?" Now, I'm not sure what that means. I get the force of it, though. He goes on to say the great Alexandrian Jew Philo expressed the same impression about the law. Philo said, "If there is anyone in the world who is a praiser of equality, that man is Moses." Rauschenbusch concludes this section, "It was the decay of the primitive democracy and the growth of luxury, tyranny, extortion, of court life and feudal nobility, which Samuel wisely feared when the people demanded a king." And he refers there to 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 10 to 18, where God said to Samuel, "It is not you the people have rejected in asking for a king. It is me they have rejected from being king over them." So that was still to come. The dynasty that was founded by Saul and then he was replaced by David, and then of course Solomon. And in the days of Solomon, as we've said elsewhere, this tendency towards luxury, tyranny, court life, feudal nobility, international commerce, we could add to that. All of that really started to develop from the days of Solomon. Next time, Rauschenbusch goes deeper into examining the attitude, the prophetic attitude, and what we should bring to our modern life and discussions and analyses, if we are Christians, from the Old Testament prophets.